I've no idea what he actually said there, so it's kind of interesting walking in the door to a round of applause that I have no idea what he just said. What did you say?
Pretty much just your name.
Cool.
So, Aidan, what's the best movie you've seen recently?
The best movie that I've seen recently, I'll give a bit of backstory to it as well, just to make it, just to string it out a little, because sometimes I don't talk much at all, but it was on Netflix, right? Which, I have a kind of a love-hate relationship with,
That's a good joke.
Like a lot of us do, given that most of the stuff on it you don't want to see. And if you're a producer and if you make something and Netflix wants it, they don't pay you much. So the idea is not to get your stuff on Netflix. People think it's got a lot of cred and all that kind of stuff. And it means people can see it, but you're selling it for rock bottom to them because they've got thousands of things. So every now and then I look up say the New York Times or the Guardian or the Irish Times will do 50 best films on Netflix. So I picked 5 of them. And the first one, I'd heard of it vaguely, but, of course it had won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, the year before. So it had lots of recognition, but, it was on Netflix. And I don't think I'd ever met anyone else who's seen it, apart from maybe one guy. And it's called, and you've probably all seen it, Shoplifters. Anyone? Nobody. One person. Did you like it? So that's the state of the world at the moment. A film wins the main prize at Cannes, and 2 people in this room have seen it, and I only found it through Netflix. And is it Japanese or Korean? It's Japanese, right? It's just a quite strange film about a family, a kind of family, and you're just not really sure, what's going on. It reminded me a lot of a great Japanese film from years ago called Tokyo Story, made by the master Japanese filmmaker Ozu. Really slow, like reading a book or a Chekhov story or something. An amazing film. So I would recommend anyone who's not seen it to check it out. It just pulls the kind of rug from under your feet constantly, and you don't really know what's going on, and you start to root for people who are doing bad things, kind of, and it's not easily resolved. It's got a lot of peculiar characters and characteristics, and then it just takes some turns that are mind-blowing, and it's had a big emotional impact, and it's just actually quite entertaining as well. And I can't probably say any more about it, but I went to see The Irishman the other day, and it didn't compare in any way, in terms of just trying to be, something that you'd be interested in. I found it quite a boring story, and I loved all of those actors. I love them all. I love Martin Scorsese, and they all did brilliant work, but the story just wasn't interesting enough. Are you asleep, Kasia?
In the past, you've indicated a preference for roles in lower budget productions versus roles in Hollywood blockbusters. Is that just to do with the prominence of the characters you might get, or is it something about the creative process?
I was probably just trying to sound good, cool, or something.
Okay.
No. Seriously, I do try to mix it up. I do have to earn a living, and I've been lucky, I suppose, working in mostly in TV for the last 12 years or 14 years, because this thing started happening in TV where they made these novelistic dramas that ran for years and years and never had an ending, like The Wire, which was the first one that I actually, Queer as Folk I'd been in before, which was a very short run thing, as in it was only 10 episodes, but it was that kind of thing, a kind of panoramic view of a city. So the stuff I've ended up being in, I've been contracted to for years on end, has been quite high profile stuff on HBO and things like that. And when I'm not doing that, I'll just take whatever the most interesting job is, and whether it's something that's going to actually cost me money to do it, or I'm paying for everyone's taxis, or like the film that Barry and myself did. Like there's it's just whatever the interesting job is, and I had one of the things I have done that I've really regret doing was playing a small part in a big movie that I get slagged over like intensely because my performance is not good. And if you're only there for like 2 days or 1 day or whatever,
that The Dark Knight Rises?
It is, yeah. And like I'm horrified by that. It's a good film, but like
there's a lot of memes about it.
I know. I wish somebody had directed me. But like, what was interesting was, Christopher Nolan and his director of photography, Wally Pfister, are just like, they were like making a student film, but like with like 150 million to spend on it. They were literally just making it up and walking around, except with an IMAX camera and like in a plane, in a real plane, flying around. And I said to somebody, that scene was very tricky because no one could hear what anyone was saying. The IMAX camera is really noisy. It's like a washing machine. Tom Hardy hadn't worked out what his voice was going to be yet, so he had this mask on, and I couldn't hear anything that anybody was saying. And I couldn't hear my own voice. It was all a mess. And I said to somebody, is this being recorded, yeah? No, don't cut it out. I asked somebody, I said, well, when we do this, I said it to him, Christopher Nolan, I said, when we come and ADR this scene, as in go back and dub it, go back and do the voices again, because no one can hear what anyone's saying. Tom Hardy's got this voice that he hasn't decided what it is yet. I'll be able to, when we redub this scene, it's going to be better. Yeah. And the sound guy looked at me and says, oh, no, Christopher Nolan would never, ever do ADR. He considers it like a failure. A sign of failure to go back and add any sound afterwards, and everyone else does it, but I get it. And I think he's a great filmmaker, like a really great filmmaker. Anyway, that's the answer to that one. And then something will come along like You're Ugly Too or whatever, which was a film, it'll be made on I think actually they had not a bad budget. It was maybe €500,000 or whatever, but I've done ones that we've made for like 15 grand.
Oh wow.
Or nothing. Yeah. And because they're interesting, and because you want to mix it up, and once you're able to pay the bills for a while, you should just take whatever the most interesting thing is. And I don't know if people, how many people see it or not. It's always that's always a thing. You probably should think about it a bit more. I've done loads of things that no one's ever seen, for a reason probably.
So when referring, I just read this article, maybe this is another example of you just kind of like saying something because you thought it would be funny to say.
Is it about horses' heads?
No.
Okay.
What was the thing about horses' heads?
Oh, I did this interview once where I kind of make stuff up, when I'm doing interviews to keep it entertaining.
You're doing a good job here.
It got like widely printed about like chat roulette and kind of sex addiction and stuff. It was all untrue. But I'd kind of did this interview for Irish Tattler magazine and mentioned that when I go on chat roulette that I always wear like a horse's head mask, just so no one can see. And this was before chat roulette was just pure masturbation,
Well, no, sorry. So the original question I was going to ask was, in this interview or whatever, you refer to the character you played in The Wire, Tommy Carcetti. You referred to him as I instead of like he or something like that. Is that like reflective of a relationship you have either with certain characters or all our characters you depict, or was it just like?
I think I tend to say I quite a lot, because it is me, And I always found it a bit much when people were talking about him, and I'm going to bring him, and he's going to come in, and he's going to say this. What would he do? And I'm like, it's not him. It's like me, or it's you. I never really got it when people were talking about the character as like this other entity, because it's not, it's them, you know, it's, but then you can't get away with saying the I all the time, so it kind of gets a bit mixed up, and sometimes you will, well, often you're misquoted in interviews anyway, so whether you say, if you did say I, they'd say he or whatever. I have a tendency to say I, because that's just the way I think of it. Now maybe I've stopped doing it so much. If you're saying that you've only noticed it with Carcetti, that's just something I've always done, because I just think it's me.
Fair enough. No, nothing philosophical there, just like...
No.
Yeah. So, across your career, has anyone stood out as being like particularly great to work with, either in terms of actors or like, you know, directors or whatever?
Yeah. A lot of people, I mean, they're usually the ones that you were with at the start, or the people who gave you first breaks and stuff. Like, I'm really bad at auditions, which is how most actors get work. And I've had, you know, I could count them on one hand, the amount of jobs I've got from auditions. Because I have a tendency to not want to please, or to, you know, I suppose I thought acting was some kind of rebellious profession, but it's not, you know, it's all about kind of complying and giving people what they want and being a good boy, you know. And going into a room with a stranger and trying to, you know, pull off a scene, I've just never, you know, I need like a week or 2 days, but not like 5 minutes. So I ended up in this position where the people who did give me work were really interesting directors who kind of didn't really go with the audition process. And, you know, and if I was making films, I probably wouldn't, you know, do the traditional audition process either. So, you know, very early on, I ended up working with this director called Antonia Bird, who's no longer with us, on a film for BBC called Safe, which was, you know, we made it in the 1993, I think. It won the BAFTA that year for Best Drama, and it was about a group of homeless kids living in this hostel, or not living in it, because I played this guy who was, you know, they just didn't want in there, you know, and it was probably my first proper lead, or one of my first proper lead screen roles. And she cast a lot of people who were, a lot of them were, you know, genuine, real actors, like Robert Carlyle was in it, Andrew Tiernan, Stephen McIntosh, you know, really good actors. And there was a lot of improvisation. There was a very loose feeling to it, but it was like intense, you know, the feeling of, you know, that we were doing something, you know, that meant something that was scary, something that, like, you know, didn't really have a programmed, you know, process. You know, we were just shooting it on the streets in London. And there was this actress in it who I did most of my stuff with, called Kate Hardy. And Kate was, I think we're born on the same day, actually. She's like maybe a day younger than me or something like that. And, you know, she had come up from, she'd been in all these really great films, like Mona Lisa was one of the films she was in. She was the kid that they were looking for in Mona Lisa. I don't know if any of you have seen Neil Jordan's film Mona Lisa from, I think it's from '86. It's a really good film about the London kind of seedy underworld and prostitution and crime and love and revenge. And Kate had been in that, and she'd been in The Craze, and she taught me like loads about, because I didn't know what I was doing. You know, because I hadn't been to drama school. I'd been in Dublin Youth Theatre, and there's a lot of improvisation and stuff, but it was very kind of unstructured. You know, I'd been in some plays and all the rest of it, but I definitely didn't really know what I was doing on camera. I hadn't really worked out that you've got to, you know, we're doing this scene today, and then we're doing that one, but this one's already happened. I was just doing them as if they were all the first scene, or, you know, and Kate was just like really, really loose, and just like, just fucking do what you want. Just like, you know, let's just make this exciting. All we've got to do is make it, you know, surprise each other. You know, don't use the script or use it, or, you know, let's do something else. And I really got the idea that this is it. It happens now in the next 5 minutes, or it doesn't happen at all. So, and that's great, because you're not going to be doing the same thing every day. Like, I've done a lot of theater, and, you know, I love that, but you know, the opportunity to just do something completely different every day, every 5 minutes. Is anyway. So Kate was great, Antonia was great. The writer Jez Butterworth, who's since become a huge playwright, his plays Jerusalem and The Ferryman have like won a lot of Tony Awards and Olivier, where they won everything. I did his first play in London at the Royal Court. It's called Mojo. It was set in the music industry in Soho in the 50s. And all of those people who were in that cast, like Andy Serkis was in it, who ended up doing, all that Gollum in Lord of the Rings and like so many other things. And Tom Hollander is a brilliant actor who's, people know him, I suppose, from Rev and stuff like that now. But it was the play, and it was Jez's first play, and it was like a big hit. And we were in like the Royal Court in London, which is probably one of maybe the best new writing theatre in the world. And like a blazing hot summer of '95, with just a group of people again just daring each other to do better, which was a very similar feeling to the safe shoot I was talking about. You're with the right bunch of people, suddenly everything shunts forward by like a lot, and you take a lot more risks, and you just don't care. You don't care if it goes wrong. And Jez was like 25 or something, So that was a really exciting time, and working with those people. And then there's a few people you've just seen, along the way. Like I went to Neil Tobin's funeral last week. Neil signed my equity card. I mean, people don't even. You can work now without being a part of the union, but you couldn't when I was starting out. You had to have a certain amount of words. You were trying to get contracts to do like a voiceover or something where you got like 50 words, and then you're going to get the next step towards your union card and stuff like that. So Neil signed my card, but I never worked with him. And there was a lot of these older actors that I was very inspired by, but that's not the answer. The question is different. So. Thanks for the medal, by the way.
So just circle back to something you said a minute ago. So I've landed no roles, audition or not. I was wondering, how does one land a role if not via auditioning? Is just friends recommending you, or?
Okay. Well, we were talking earlier, before we came in, about I was in this youth theatre group called Dublin Youth Theatre, which you have to audition to get into. But even then, I didn't audition for that either because I just didn't know how. So I hung around, My sister was in it, and I hung around. And then one day, she was in a play. It was called the Do-It-Yourself Frankenstein outfit, and she was playing a robot. So I made myself a robot costume and just went along and joined in. I just walked on stage and in a scene and kind of walked around and I think that was my stage debut, and I wasn't even supposed to be in the play, right? So I literally show up and just walk on and do it. There's pretty much a direct line between every job I've had. I've got, like I said, I've got some from auditions. My first professional stage role was in London, and I was kind of hustling around town, and I had a few headshots and a few CVs, and it was a kind of a network of people who'd say, oh, well, such and such is in town, and he's auditioning for a play in London, and that was when I did get from an audition, and that eventually led to, say, that play Mojo I was telling you about. Everything, there was just a clear line of, this director has seen you in this, and it gets passed on to that, to that, to that. And that's how it works. I ended up in Game of Thrones because I've been in The Wire, and if you've been around a bit, people will either think, well, he's right for the job, he's not right for the job, he's a good actor, he's a bad actor, whatever. And then, but very early on, it was literally some person has seen you in this play, they've cast you in this TV thing, someone else who worked on that cast you in that, but not from auditions. And convincing people, I suppose, that you're, a lot of directors, they want someone who they can't, who they're not sure about, who they can't read, and that's probably got me a few jobs as well.
Okay. So just one last question from me. How have you found working as an actor in a country with a relatively small film television sector relative to the UK or the US? Have you enjoyed traveling a lot for work, or has it been stressful sort of
Yeah,
experience?
well, I mean, I've had to. I lived outside of Ireland for 20 years because there was no work here. I mean, there was. Like, I was 17 when I got started professionally. There just weren't any other 17-year-old actors, right? So all the parts of 17-year-olds were being played by people who were like 25. So they just didn't really take you seriously. You know, you're like a kid walking around with your photograph, and they're just like, well, you know, you're just a kid. You know, he's going to do it. And it's like, well, that's David Hurley. He's like 15 years older than me. Great. So I went to London, you know, and stayed there for 20 years. And, you know, worked in America a lot then. But like I had a couple of roles here, like very early on, but they were day player stuff, you know. I thought it was great. Like the first year I was working, I did like 3 days on 2 films. And I thought this was the best thing ever. And I got my first paycheck, was actually signed by George Harrison from the Beatles, because he had this company called Handmade, you know, who made like Life of Brian, and there was a film called Lonely Passionate Judith Hearn, where I had my character was called Youth in Liquor Store, and I had to sell some booze to Maggie Smith, and I had like 4 lines, and I forgot one of them. And it's in the film. You can see me kind of going, oh, fuck, just stumbling through. They kept it in. And then, you know, and I have worked here a bit, but it's nearly always got to be somewhere else. And you know, I never. I suppose I did a TV series here called Love Hate, right? Which was big, and no one wanted to work. People didn't want to do stuff in RTE, or just thought, oh, well, we can't do good drama here. So you know, why even try? And
do you think
I deliberately wanted to. Like I'd been in America, and I was like, I had plenty of things. I had some good offers. And I was like, well, why not? So, so we attacked that, but it was about a script. It was about somebody really bright, Stuart Carlin, putting something together that was like just super topical. And I'd kind of, I just wondered, I'd always wondered why in a country this size there's so many of us, killing each other, but, it's to do with drugs. And money, and, Celtic Tiger and all that stuff, and people having excess money to spend on cocaine, basically.
And do you think Love Hate changed that, or do you think that attitude is still present?
I don't know. I think people feel like they can. I don't really know much about what goes on in RTE. I don't watch TV that much. Someone said to me the other day, RTE is it's finished. They've no money. It's like I just wasn't really up on the story. I know that they do good. They used to do really good current affairs programs and debates and sports and stuff like that. And there's so much reality TV which numbs my mind that I just don't really watch television. So I don't think, well look, BBC, where I got all my first jobs off BBC, who had this history of doing fantastic dramas and one-off dramas, amazing stuff. And even, they're still doing it, but that era is it's kind of still there, but it's been replaced by this other thing, which is even better, the stuff that was kind of pioneered by HBO, I suppose, or maybe even before that, Twin Peaks. A lot of people talk about The Sopranos being the start of the second or the golden age of television as it is now, and I was like, well, what about Twin Peaks? Because I thought that was it, but that was 10 years before. But the fact that it's the first thing people who don't know each other, people who meet, it's the first thing that anyone talks about now. What are you watching on TV? And it's like that or the weather. I mean, we started talking about the weather straight away.
It was raining.
Yeah. Nothing new there. Anyway, I don't really know what the story is with RTE. Yeah. But I don't have any. I wouldn't, say, oh well, I'm not. I take a job in BBC sooner than a job in RTE or whatever. If it's a good role, it doesn't matter where it is.
Cool. Okay, so we'll take some questions from the floor now. So if anyone has a question, raise your hand, please. Yeah.
You were writing some video game, Quantum Break.
Oh, right. Thank you.
Kind of a unique enough project for certain actors. I was wondering, is that something that you
No, I didn't. Sorry, were you finished?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I didn't. I know you got the time. I didn't seek it out. I was really surprised to be asked to be in a video game, and it was, but it was, all motion capture and all this stuff, which I was quite familiar with because I used to be great friends with Andy Serkis, who kind of pioneered a lot of this stuff. Like he went off to do Lord of the Rings as like a 4-week voiceover job, and like then was in New Zealand for like 10 years or something. You know what I mean? And we stopped. I haven't seen him. I've seen him like 4 times since. You know what I mean? So I was kind of familiar with it, and he'd always talked about it. And he had done at the time. Said, look, they're asking me to do this Lord of the Rings thing, and then they asked him to do King Kong, and he was like, I don't want to be just. I can either be the guy who does this. I can be the best guy in the world at this. I either do it or I don't. So he said, I'm going to do it. And he kind of is. And so when the video game thing came up for me, it was like really strange environment. I'd never before. You're working in just a big white cube, with like cameras like everywhere in a suit with like a lycra suit with like bits of like little clowns' noses all over you, and it's really difficult, right? But I did enjoy it, and I played the game a bit, but I couldn't finish it. I wasn't good enough. So my son Joe played it, and he was very happy to tell me when he killed me. He recorded it, and I played because you can play as I'm the kind of I played the villain in this thing.
Yeah.
But it's a quite good character called Paul Serene, who invents him and his friend invent a time machine. So it's a time travel game, which I don't think it had been done before. So there's parts of the game, like the main protagonist or whatever is Sean Ashmore, who's in all the X-Men films, and so I'm his friend, and we become nemesis or whatever. And but there's parts of the game where you can play as yourself, and it's like, so I was sitting there playing and it's a really strange thing to do because the image is like hyper real, But and you can kind of just go around playing as yourself. Not many people get the opportunity to do that. So it was just an out of the blue. It's not something I'd be kind of running, to do again. But it was a really interesting experience because I just never had done anything like it before. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I find performance for film or for screen, I guess, to be very detailed in the sense you need to find a balance between being connected to the character but also hitting the marks for what's being captured. Do you find that you have a technique or just your craft to kind of find the balance point between being connected to the character but also hitting those marks?
Do you mean, are you talking about like literally just the technical side of it?
I suppose so, yeah. But still kind of being honest to the performance.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you just develop that thing over time. Like I said, when I did that thing safe, I didn't even know what a mark was. You know what I mean? I'm just like, well, why can they film me if I'm over there? I didn't think about it's got to be in focus or anything like that. It was just very loose, and that comes across in that film. But like it's just, you can see the inexperience all over it. But that's also what's good about it. People look like they really aren't trying, or don't even know what they're doing, but like it's just very kind of spontaneous. So I suppose over the first film role I had it's a long time ago, it was like 31 years ago. It was, so I suppose you just learn as you go. Like literally when I was hanging around in that youth theater before I got my first part in the play, it was like learning the ropes. You're just looking at other people and going, oh, that's how you do it. Then I got my first professional play, and that's how you do it. And you just look to the older guys or girls, and they kind of tell you what to do. So I feel like technically I do know what I'm doing, but you kind of don't want to get that across. Like I've just been filming this thing in Vancouver, and the guy who the showrunner or whatever, the guy who's the one of the main writers was just sent us an email as end of shoot thing, and I was saying, yeah, well look, I think we worked hard. But we're trying to not look like we're trying, or that we're it's about hitting all those marks, but just almost unconsciously, Yeah. That was a good one. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Sue.
Regarding Game of Thrones, were you happy with how it ended in
I think it was very appropriate that it was a kid who'd been like sitting in a chair for a long time, a kid who'd been pushed out the window, in the first episode. Sorry, have I given this away for? There was a lot of flack about the last season of Game of Thrones. I was astounded. I'm not astounded, the way people are, the mentality that there is nowadays when people get on Twitter and all of these things and just slag the fuck out of everything. I really hate it. I'm not on any social media, and, it's this kind of really nasty, strain of behavior that's kind of come with all of that technology. And for people to turn on the writers of something that, people had adored for 7 seasons in such a nasty fashion as they did, I was just taken aback. I really was, because they're really talented. And that story was impossible to end. I was, I wasn't in the last season, and I was... But I was in it a lot, right? So I was around, these people, and I thought they'd made this like amazing thing that I was thinking, how can you end it? You can't really, right? And even when the characters that were, there was this thing that ran for years where people were like very far away from each other, and there was a lot of talk about far away lands and characters, and eventually they started interacting, and it's like, right, okay, this is. It's a different beast, And then you've got this final season, which I thought, like, some of the best scenes, the best sequences of Game of Thrones were in the last season. I don't have any doubt about that. They ended it in the only way that they could end it, which was, strangely reminiscent of how it began, right? There's people sitting in a kind of land that seems to have some kind of stability, but there's also uncertainty and threat, which is, I suppose that's kind of what the world is like all the time. There was a part of me that wanted it to end about 20 minutes before it did. It's just that it was an image that I was like, that's just so fantastic. It was like dragon flying away, holding Daenerys Targaryen. I was like, that's just stunning. I thought the episode before it was fucking amazing. Sorry for my language. What was the question again?
Oh, were you happy with the ending?
Oh, happy with the ending. Yeah, I was. I thought it was impossible. Yeah.
But were you happy with the ending of your character? Because in the season he dies, it seems like he gets like way stupider than like every season before that.
Yeah, well, that's the way it goes. It's fine. I mean, I always wanted, well, actually, I don't even really want to answer that question because I like to keep secrets.
Okay.
And a lot of actors don't keep their secrets enough, I feel, and they want to they're doing all these interviews and they're telling you, well, this is what I was thinking, this is what this is about. But, I've always preferred actors, who have, who don't tell you what's going on. I know you had Pacino in here once. Did anyone ever see a film called Scarecrow? Well, you should seek that one out. And there's this. It's a bit kind of. Some of it's a bit over the top. It's Al Pacino and Gene Hackman. As these two kind of oddballs. But the sequence at the end of it is just this amazing scene with Al Pacino in a fountain, walking around, and you're like, where is this coming from? It's not explained, but he just kind of suddenly just breaks, and it's not explained. So I don't want to be just like totally not answer the question. I mean, I always thought, well, I always wanted people to like that character, Littlefinger, and it is written that way in the books, that he's charming, and he would have to be charming to, to get into those circles he did, and manipulate the way he did. But there was this romantic thing that was also, my main thing was this is somebody who's driven by being spurned, and that's, we all know that that's what that character was about. He loved somebody that he couldn't have, and then there was this whole strange relationship with Sansa Stark, which was his undoing, and it was about a warped romantic idea, which I'm really glad didn't come to anything. Anyone else?
So yeah.
So, what role would you say you had most enjoyment playing as? Like, which character did you connect with the most?
Just of stuff I played. Quite a lot of them, I think I haven't had many roles that I wasn't meant to get, because I don't get them through the traditional way, I feel. So there's a lot of them, I did this thing called Queer as Folk when I was about 29, which at the time, I just thought this is as far away from myself as I can get. And I was thinking, how did I get this job? Okay, I'll tell you how I got it. Christopher Eccleston didn't want to do it. Right? So he suggested me to these people in Channel 4. I was like, well, this is, I feel I'm not this guy at all, so let's do that. And that was quite a big one for me, in that it was the first time I'd had like a big, recognizable, like people stopping you on the street kind of thing. And I kind of just loved it because I was playing this wild, voracious kind of gay man in Manchester, like in a quite hedonistic setting, but with multi-layered, that one, and these ones that you won't know, we did a film called Treacle Jr. I've got a relationship with a director called Jamie Traves. We've done 3 films together, and we never really have money. The first one had some money. David Bowie actually put up a quarter of the budget of the first one, which is quite interesting. Jamie had directed like some really good videos for like Radiohead and Coldplay. He made this video for the Radiohead song Just, which is the one where the guy's lying on the ground and he's not telling anyone what's wrong with him. And that really got him noticed. He got, multi MTV awards for a video he did for Coldplay called The Scientist, which is all backwards. And all of his videos, and those are the ones that people know, but like he makes them all as films with like a story, a narrative. It's never just a band playing. And we've done a few things together. And we did this thing called Treacle Jr. that we really wanted to do because it was as a result of probably being in Game of Thrones and trying to do something that was lighter, or a character that was likable and just funny and stupid and goofy. And we kind of had several different stories that we were trying to make at the same time. And we ended up playing this guy who is based on a guy that I used to know around. You might know him. He's a guy in Dublin called Aidan Walsh. And he used to call himself Aidan Walsh, Master of the Universe. And he'd go up for election, and he was a musician. And he was quite innovative. Like, he was the first guy ever to like video weddings in Ireland, right? Because he saw it. He was like he'd been brought up in all these kind of pretty rough orphanages and stuff, abandoned as a child. Set up a rehearsal studio in Temple Bar that like all these bands, used to rehearse in. Bands who went on to become really big. He directed My Bloody Valentine's first video, right? And he used to have like beer mats with like cut into weird shapes for when people came to the studio to like, they had to join, match them up because to make sure that they weren't like imposters or people pretending to be Simon Carmody from the Golden Horde. He was, he had a lot of these things going on. And I've always found him really fascinating. He got beaten up. His video business ended because someone just battered him and stole his camera because he was like not your, he's the kind of guy that people pick on. And I just really wanted to play him. So we'd been kind of talking about doing something like that. So we ended up making this film called Treacle Jr., where I played this character based on Aidan Walsh. And that was one that I found really important for me. Not that many people saw it, Except then one night after Glastonbury coverage on BBC, they showed it like right after it, like midnight on like the Saturday night or whatever, and like, you know, millions of people saw it. I bet you no one here saw it. You saw it.
So I think we've got time for one last question. Yeah.
You spoke earlier about how some modern dramas never seem to end. With respect to that, were you happy you got written out of Peaky Blinders when you did, or would you have liked to stay involved?
Giving the game away again. No, I mean, look, Peaky Blinders was, I think Stephen Knight, the creator of Peaky Blinders, only wanted to do 5 seasons. And I was brought in season 4. I thought I was just doing that one. And I remember the conversation I had with him was great. She says, yeah, because I rang him up, or he rang me up, or whatever, and he said, I've got this character called Abraham Gold. And I was like, great, done. I didn't know anything about it. So I got to do the second season. I mean, it is disappointing. I'll tell you what I am disappointed about is that all of the actors in there all had scenes cut this year. Everyone. Because he's such a, voracious, like the way he writes, Stephen Knight can just write stuff like, it was overwritten. It was loads of this stuff shot that never ended up in there. So I had done, several scenes, mostly around Polly, which were quite romantic. I just didn't make it. And because I wanted to balance out the violence with some romance, I really did. I wanted to play a violent romantic, because what I saw it as, he's like, okay, this guy's a killer. I was like, okay, but let's try and show his side that's like just, not that. So some of our romance hit the floor. They did, at one point, the first script I read, it's like, for those who don't want to know what happens, there was a certain way that I exited, and I insisted with the director, Anthony Byrne, who's from Dublin, who'd done Love Hate. Like that whole show, like it's such a Irish mafia thing. Like to be making it in England with all these actors and the DP and the designer and everything. I wanted to suggest that I go out exactly the same way as I came in a flurry of a hail of, stab wounds. And there was this my favorite moment in it was something that Anthony Byrne came up with on the day, which was like an entrance. Pretty much the first time I showed up in this season, I came through a wall, like literally ran through the wall. And, it was written as something else, it was this kind of very, very Batman thing of like, he comes, oh, hey, how's it going? That's my brother Jenny. But, he comes through like the roof, kind of hanging by his ankles, like shooting. And it just seems really ridiculous. It was very Batman. And the building that we were filming in was a heritage building, so they couldn't put a hole in the roof. But they built this fake wall. So he came up with this plan of, an entrance. And we had 5 minutes to shoot it. Now that's something that happens quite a lot on that thing. The schedule's so tight. And Cillian, when I first saw Cillian Murphy, working, they'd spent like Adrian Brody had come on, and he spent like 7 hours or something, talking about, who am I and all this. And I was like, okay, we got to do the scene, And Cillian did his stuff and just nailed it in like 5 minutes. And it was like, it was a page or 2 pages of dialogue. He did it twice, and the first one was, the best. And that's the way it is. And we came to shoot that scene, and we had like, it was like 5 minutes. I had to come through the wall. So I was very, very, and we were talking about this thing about the technical thing. I was like very, very specific about where do I need to look? Where do I need to point the gun? Which, angle does it have to be at? Where's the camera? Put luminous tape on everything, because there's going to be dust, and I know I'm going to get one shot at this. Tape that I had my hat like taped with like all kinds of like tape and glue and everything to my head, knowing that like it's probably going to come off, and it didn't. So that was the highlight of my career.
I think that's all we've got time for tonight. Folks, give me another round of applause for Aidan Gillen. Thank you.